Welcome to Fathers Are Parents Too. I'm your host, Ann Mitchell. You know, we hear a lot about deadbeat dads and the epidemic of fatherlessness in our country. But what about the other side of the story? What about single fathers who want to be more involved in their children's lives, but who have been cut out of their lives by an angry ex-wife or the court, or who have been reduced to nothing more than an open wallet with absolutely no input into their children's lives? Today we have with us two guests from the Fathers' Rights and Equality Exchange, otherwise known as F.R.E.E., Brent Wellman and Sandra Masnaghetti. Brent is the Associate Director and the Legislative Director of Affairs for F.R.E.E., and Sandy is the Director of Media Relations. Guys, what exactly does F.R.E.E. do?
Well, Ann, F.R.E.E. is the Fathers' Rights and Equality Exchange, and we're a union of like-minded fathers who want to spend more time with our children. We are an association that has really three thrusts to it. One is a thrust of legislative reform, which is near and dear to me since I'm Director of Legislative Affairs. And the other is, of course, media relations, which Sandy will talk about. And the third is an outreach and a support network that F.R.E.E. has established to let fathers know that they're not alone.
I'd like to add to that too, in part dealing with the area of support. There's another group of people that's involved with that, and that's the new mates for the fathers who are in the Fathers' Rights and Equality Exchange. And so what we do is we offer support for those women as well, so that we can share some ideas and issues, of which there are a lot of common threads in that area too.
Brent, you mentioned your work in the legislative sector. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, yes, Ann. I do a lot of lobbying, specifically in the state of California, but we have concerns that go nationwide, and we now have legislative liaisons in several state capitals. The main thrust of fathers' rights within the legislative arena is in several areas. One area that we need to touch on is that of the CAPTA reform. You know, CAPTA is the Child Abuse and Treatment and Prevention Act. I think I got that correct. It's the Mondale Act of 1974. It was a well-intentioned act which intended to protect children from child abuse. It has, however, made an accusation of child abuse a weapon for custodial parents to use against non-custodial parents to keep them away from the children.
Just the accusation. How does that work as a weapon?
Well, it's a very effective weapon in that as soon as a charge is made, generally in order to protect the child, the parent is immediately removed from any contact with the child, which was the malicious parent's objective to begin with. Secondly, it's a very difficult thing to disprove. It's essentially proving a negative. Fathers have spent countless thousands of dollars in litigation trying to regain contact with their children once a false allegation of abuse has been made.
So just the allegation itself will remove them from their children's lives, or vice versa?
Oh yes, in most cases. Several of the several points within the measure of CAPTA contribute to this. The one really sore point is the immunity that is offered to social workers in what are called mandated reporters. Mandated reporter is somebody who reports the child abuse once they hear about it. And as soon as they decide to report that, they're absolutely protected from any action that they might take against the parent, regardless of how malicious that act might be. And the immunity is absolute. Now, we propose that that be changed to a qualified immunity, the same immunity that's offered to, say, police officers. You can't sue a police officer for arresting you, but you can sue one for misconduct.
Okay.
And we'd like to see that level of reform seep down to the states. Our problem is that with the federal legislation, the state legislation in 55 different state and territorial legislatures has had to follow that. And they cannot change it even if they want to until the federal statute is changed.
So what is F.R.E.E. doing to address these problems, both on, as you mentioned, the federal level, and also you mentioned you have state people working in the state capitals as well?
Yes, well, we propose new legislation. We support legislation that is pro-dad, mostly through letter writing and active lobbying of the legislators. In the federal arena, we depend on other fathers groups which have a greater presence than we do there. We are all fairly allied, and we are like-minded on CAPTA and the Child Support Act of 1988, reforming those items. So we depend on them for the federal. We use ourselves for the various states.
Okay. And what you mentioned also, you have a support function with the organization. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, we have a hotline, and the hotline number is 1-500-4DADS, F-O-R-D-A-D-S. The number allows a father to call in to essentially an answering service, and we have numbers of volunteers called area coordinators who can take a call for help from a dad and get the information from him and get back to him with at least the knowledge that he is not alone.
Mm-hmm.
We are not a legal referral service. We are not a legal aid society, and most of us are not attorneys, and we can't give legal advice. We could give advice, but we don't do those sorts of things. But we do let them know that there are people out there that understand their plight, who have been through their plight, and who want to be of assistance.
Sandy, you're a woman, and yet you're involved with fathers' rights. Why is that?
Well, I'm certainly the first to believe in equal rights for everyone, for women and for fathers in this case, and for children as well. I think that for me, it's similar to a lot of the other women who are involved with free mates, in that we've seen our husband go through a system. And we went in naively believing that if your husband is a very responsible father, is a very loving father, that those things will be considered. And for me, it was quite an education to discover that it's not that way at all. He certainly wasn't treated with any respect, and very limited options on what he could do. I have to say, in our case, we're very fortunate in that everybody's working hard to communicate with one another, but that's our case only. There's a lot of other cases where those types of situations aren't happening. And for me, I felt very strongly that this certainly is not a right situation, and really wanted to get involved to see what we could do to change some of this and to change some of these perceptions as well.
And is that how you came to be involved with this organization?
Right.
And now you're the Director of Media Relations?
Right.
And what do you do in that role?
Well, it has to do with the education process. First and foremost, of course, educating the public to what the issues are, and that it's not just every father is a deadbeat dad. It's certainly not that way. But also educating the media as well. I think that we've been very successful, in fact, in becoming a resource for a lot of the media outlets. If there's a reporter that's doing a story on father's issues or family law issues, for that matter, or a program that wants to do a talk show about these types of issues, they're going to call us first. And I think we've worked very hard to get that distinction to be a credible source and a reasonable organization that has some very good facts that people can use in that situation.
You mentioned also before being a second mate, support for second mates, and I noticed earlier that you are listed as one of the organization's second mates liaisons. Mm-hmm. What's that about?
Well, it's a group called F.R.E.E. Mates, and it's really a support system for people who are married to someone or are getting involved with someone who has a child by a previous marriage. When you get into this situation, you're getting a package deal. You're getting someone, you're also getting a child or maybe children, and then there's the ex-wife as well. And there's a lot of issues in learning to deal with all of those situations. And through a network on the internet, this particular group communicates and shares experiences with one another, and it's very valuable, and it's very interesting how many common threads there are in situations that are very common. But also a portion of that is, again, education and trying to really help people in this situation learn how to help the situation to be better, to be more communicative with everyone in the family, as opposed to getting into a them and us, or us and them situation, because it's very easy to do, I think.
So are you suggesting that it's actually possible then for a man to communicate and speak to his ex-wife, let alone his wife? Do you speak to your husband or boyfriend's ex-wife? Is that what you're saying here?
Oh, certainly. I think it's really in the best interest of the child to try and have as open a channel of communication as you can. Now, it takes everyone working at that. I can't say that everyone is successful in being able to do that. But when you really look at the child needing both parents, you want to do what you can to really enable that. And that's one of the messages that we have.
Now, it seems to me that if you could achieve that sort of communication, then that would help to address the situation you, Brent, were talking about, the false allegations of abuse and that sort of thing, because it would seem that it would be harder for a mom to make those allegations if there's that kind of communication. So I can see how this comes full circle.
Oh, there's no doubt, Annie. One of the beautiful things about F.R.E.E., as opposed to some other groups that have a single thrust, we have these three arms, and they can help support each other.
Kind of like Shiva.
Very much like that. I don't think Shiva had, she probably had more than 3 arms. But the point is, in the legislative arena, for example, there was a bill last year that we got passed, which was the New Mate Income Bill. And this bill banned the use of second mate's income, or free mate's income, to calculate dad's child support. The logic of the old law was that the new wife brings in extra income, therefore dad has more to spend, therefore mom on the other end, the wife-in-law, if you will, can enjoy the fruits of the second marriage. And we believe that her enjoying the fruits of the second marriage is not a fair thing. And we found that several new mates wound up paying for children that they never had given birth to, had never met, and they were spending large sums of their income to support other children. We convinced the legislature that that was unfair. The recent years, we're now trying to send that message out to the other legislatures. This is, you can do this. This is how we did this.
Wouldn't that same law that you had, I guess, defeated then, wouldn't that also help fathers when their ex-wives remarry and, you know, perhaps mom has remarried a doctor who's making a lot of money? And my understanding is that child support is based also on what mom makes. So wouldn't that, didn't you hurt dads by having that taken out?
Well, no. We allowed attorneys to impute income. If mom remarries and she decides suddenly to quit her job, her obligation to child support, if she's paying for it, does not go away. If it was an elective type thing where she did lose her, she quit rather than losing her job, then there is an exception to that law. Also, if a man decides that he's going to marry somebody making a very large sum of money, and the example that went around the legislature was marrying Madonna, in order to get out of the child support, suddenly you don't have a job, you don't have an income, but mom is paying all the bills. That is considered a deadbeat issue, and it's a type of conduct we didn't want to see, and it's the kind of the conduct that is locked out of that legislation.
So in other words, Madonna would end up paying child support for dads.
Dad would still wind up paying child support, and it would come from somewhere.
Can you imagine having Madonna as a stepmom? What a thought. What a thought. Now, I want to get back to this false allegation thing you raised, because I can't imagine why anyone would make that up. I mean, child abuse is such a horrible thing that why would someone actually say someone did it when they knew they didn't?
Well, I can't always put myself in somebody else's head, but the real reason that it is used, in my mind, is that it works. The custodial parents who are fighting over custody want some lever, some magic wand to make the other side go away. False allegations of abuse gives just that very same wand. A person to whom you report false abuse, for example, faces a prison term for failing to report that abuse if it turns out to be true. By the same token, they have absolute immunity even if they report the most frivolous charges that they happen to know are false. They're absolutely protected against that. Given the fact that your job hinges on the whole thing, what would you choose?
Well, it's like the Woody Allen thing, when Mia Farrow said that he had abused the children or molested one of them, and I mean, he didn't lose his job, but certainly...
We don't generally take celebrity cases, but...
But the point is
yes.
that even though ultimately it was found that he really probably didn't do that, everyone remembers Woody Allen as the maybe child molester.
Yes.
Sandy, the typical new mate, second mate that comes to you, what's their main concern or complaint, or how are you helping these people? What are their situations?
Well, a lot of it is a control issue. I think when someone has become a new mate, there's a lot that happens in their lives that they don't have any control of all of a sudden. For instance, when the child is going to be in their home, when those things are decided, the new mate has pretty much no say in that. It's a decision that happens through a mediation process between the father and the ex-wife. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to go to the new mate and say, well, we decided every other weekend and, so many days during the week. How do you feel about cooking the dinner or cleaning the house or, having the child in the house at that point?
But didn't she know that, marrying the father, that this would...
Probably she did. She probably did. I know I did, but it's still a difficult issue to really live with. And I think part of this support network is to really help people to know they're not alone in this situation. It's not just them that's going through this. Everybody else is as well that's in this group, and that try to come up with ways to let it go. That's what I call it. Just let it go, because you can't really have your life be worrying about these things on a frequent basis. It just, you can't do it. It's not good for you emotionally.
I'm sure there are probably a lot of single fathers and second mates who are out there watching this show right now and are wondering how they can become more involved and what they can do to help change this system. What would your advice to them be?
Join F.R.E.E. right now. Pay your dues and we'll sign you right up. No, there are several good fathers groups out there that you can join for support. I'd get out and talk to as many people as you can. If you're just starting a divorce, take care of yourself. Don't quit your exercise program just because you're depressed. Don't decide that you have to live in a deadbeat dad's dump. Choose good living quarters for you, because all in all, you're going to need your mental stamina. You're going to need your mental alertness. You need to take care of yourself. You also need to show yourself as a good father. Those of you that have visitation need to know that you need to show good parenting skills, because the court, if they aren't watching you now, they soon will be. Anything you can add to that, Sandy?
And I think try, and it's very difficult to say this, but try to communicate as best you can with the ex, because that really helps to show that people are really working together trying to solve the problem. And as I say, it's certainly not an easy thing to do, but.
And speaking on behalf of second mates, what can these dads do maybe to be sensitive to? Is there one thing you would say, make sure you do this for your wife, or something special they can do to understand what their current wives are going through?
I think just be very sensitive to the issue of realizing that that the new mate's feeling like they don't necessarily have control of the situation. Just be sensitive to that, and I think taking into consideration what their input is to the situation as well.
Brent, you mentioned something, I just want to touch on it quickly. You mentioned visitation, and I have heard some single fathers I know express real frustration at that very concept that they're visiting with their children when it's their children, and I'm wondering if you can just touch on that. Is that
I've heard them say that I'm a dad, not a visitor, and we really like the term timeshare better than visitation. I use visitation to you here on this show because if I say timeshare, people think of a cabin. We really advocate a change towards a joint custody arrangements where the sharing is more equal.
Well, while you're thinking of that, let me ask you this. Joint custody, I mean, I often hear that that's really bad for children. Do you just very quickly have something you can say to address that?
There are a number of objections in that it creates shuttlecock kids who wind up going back and forth. Some children, however, actually enjoy that. Some children look at the situation as having two sets of friends, having two rooms, having two sets of toys. Many of them consider themselves more, shall I say, fortunate than their kin who are in an intact family, if you will.
Because they have two sets of everything.
Because they have two sets of everything, especially if they're connected to each other. In my own case, my own daughter has phone privileges whenever she is with me. She has phone privileges to call her mom. She has also the invitation to call me at any time. So she can feel connected to both of us no matter which one of us that she's with.
So that again goes back to, it sounds like the communication issue that you were mentioning. So I think what I'm hearing then is joint custody works or is okay for kids where there's sort of open communication between both houses and they can sort of embrace this idea of having two sets, you know, two families, two houses, two bedrooms or whatever. What about in cases where the parents can't communicate or they're always fighting, which seems to be most of my friends?
And most of my own as well. Well, the one thing I could add to that is that in joint custody situations where they have had a single parent who objects to the arrangement, living in it for a while teaches the parents, the participants, to communicate. We like that about the joint custody arrangement. It's required to communicate, but it is not a prerequisite to communicate to have joint custody. You can learn to communicate as you go along. If I decided to open up a coffee shop, I wouldn't stop because I didn't know everything about opening up a coffee shop. I could learn along the way. All I need to know is enough to satisfy the bank, pretty much. And knowing when to do everything that a coffee shop owner needs to do before you ever decide to go out and ask for the loan there wouldn't be very many coffee shops around. So we find that it has that effect on warring ex-spouses.
It reminds me of the War of the Roses. Sandy, I just wanted to touch briefly again on that second mate thing because I just find it really interesting and it's neat to see a woman up here doing this. And I'm wondering, do you have any advice that you would give to women who are thinking of becoming involved with a father, particularly, I would guess, a non-custodial father, because again, that's really where the issues with ex-wives. I have one friend and she says, well, she refers to her current husband's ex-wife as her ex-wife. She'll say, oh, I have to, you know, talk to my ex-wife, and which of course makes people wonder. But knowing what you know now, both through your own situation and helping these other women, is there any advice or cautions that you can give to someone who's thinking about maybe marrying a father, a single father?
I would say that again, coming back to, I know I keep mentioning this control thing, but it really is a large issue. And I think that it really needs to be very carefully considered that you are going to be losing control of a portion of your life. But on the other hand, you need to really think about other issues. I mean, I guess one of the biggest pieces of advice I would have is don't let that become the thing that you focus on all the time. Go on with your relationship. Focus on the happy portions of your relationship. And don't always be overanalyzing everything that happens and every move that the ex-wife makes, because if you just let it rule your life, it makes it difficult on the relationship.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned that you would advise people to get involved with F.R.E.E. Do you want to tell people how they would do that?
Certainly, you can join F.R.E.E. Via email, or you may write us at 701 Welch Road, number 232, Palo Alto, California, 94304. And we'll be happy to send you all the information. Just drop us a card, give us your name and address, and we'll send you all the information you need for joining to F.R.E.E. If you want to join by email, you can do it at free-join@vix.com.
V-I-C-K-S?
No, I'm sorry. That's a vix.com.
And that will make sense to people who have email, I guess.
That will make sense to people who are on the internet and who have email.
And you mentioned local chapters. Do any of them hold meetings? Are there in-person things people can do?
Yes, in several areas there are meetings, and more are starting up monthly. Right now we have meetings in the Sunnyvale area. We have meetings in the East Bay in California. We're setting up meetings all over the country. We have meetings set up in Boston. We had meetings in Austin, Texas. And there are more starting every
day. Thank you. We're about out of time now, and I want to thank you both for being here. Thank you very much for coming and sharing this with us. Be sure to join us next time when our guest will be noted family therapist Carol Marks, and she'll be sharing with us secrets as to how you can become and stay a more involved single father. Thank you, and see you next time on Fathers Are Parents Too.